And I was thinking about the effects of being trapped in the body. You know, there's sanity checks, and there's all sorts of implication that you're going to be really hammered by this. So they're twitchy as hell. I mean, they're both completely unreliable. So they've only got like unreliable verbal reports for that first mission only. And this report that Dr. Kasparian has betrayed them, but they're not sure, and they come back talking about monsters and Isabella Bain and all sorts of things. So they're really, I mean, ICES is really in lots of data, lots of noise, lots of uncertainty about this. They need a crack surveillance recon mission. And looking across our player characters makes perfectly good sense. First of all, we've got the psychologist, a high-ranking psychologist, former husband of an ICES board member. And he is well. I mean, they know they need a psychologist. They need somebody in there who can actually manage people talking to each other in what is effectively, an acid trip encounter group inside a monster's or somebody's body. So that's one thing. They also have, from the Chinese military and from the Soviets, I keep saying Soviets, because it's 1994 is when this was published. So the dissolution of the Soviet Union is a done deal. But from the Russian government, they have a crack spy who's not actually, who's actually a mercenary spy. So the Russians have said, she's the best. She's not one of us, but she's the best. So they have basically paid her to be on this mission. And then the Chinese government has provided a young but very good field-skilled surveillance scout lookout guy. So they have somebody who's notable, number one, for being very true to his word, his values honor, and he's also very cowardly, which means he's good at getting home. Thank you very much. So that's exactly what this team needs. So we've got these three for sure. Another person, they need an ISIS loyalist in there, but they don't know that this loyalist to ISIS, who's a skilled scientist, is actually a mole for Eon Enterprises. So that's awesome. ISIS is like, this woman's got to go. She is on the team. And of course, we know that she's totally disloyal. So that's cool. And then we finally have somebody, they need people skills. They know they need people skills. And it so happens that through personal contacts and favors owed and stuff like that, they end up with a convict who is a con artist, a people person, excellent, and is a friend to ISIS on a very personal basis, not on any loyalty or ideological basis. And that ISIS authority said, she's your gal. So it's a really nice, I mean, it's a team full of potential crisis. But from the ICES point of view, it's actually a really, really good team. Very well developed for the purpose of go there, learn lots, get all the data you can, and get home. And for God's sake, whoever on their team spilled the beans that they were from Earth and they were occupying the bodies and we're here to help, which is what they had gone and done right there in the comic. And I'm like reading the comic going, you idiots. And so anyway, so that was a huge disaster that they've tipped their hand. They know that people over there know about the jump teams, which was the worst thing that could have happened. So they really want this jump team not to give themselves away. So that was the mission. And it seemed to make a lot of sense to me, but that was a huge amount of interpretation and judgment from the canonical material on my part. And I can remember the days when that was an ideal of mine, was to be able to say, I have read the book, I have internalized the book, I know the book, I have judgments on pieces of the book, I know what little bits I'm going to tweak, I know what little bits I'm going to move forward as, front and center for a scenario. I've got the right story for you. And even if I hadn't been committed to the outcome of play, that sense of mastery of the material and being co-author with it would be a high ideal. And I can do it, but I'm definitely going to be playing more reactively forward in terms of, now that we've had the events of our first episode, now I'm just going to be playing NPCs. I am no longer... I'm looking at those adventures and I'm really not going to be like picking on, oh, that would be a good one to play, that sort of thing. No, I'm taking it all from what has occurred and how different characters are going to act. Different setting elements that haven't been active so far or that I didn't remember to bring into play. I have in mind. There are certain organizations and certain individuals who in the book are active. So I will treat them as active and do stuff that makes sense for them to do going forward. But very much not in the sense of, okay, situation de novo, mission in response to that situation because I want you to go and have this experience over there on Xenos. That won't be it. Other details, this game requires just a little bit of number allocation by the player. And I had left the players to do that. 2 of them had not succeeded in it, and a number of people were, a little puzzled by some of the mechanics. And so we had a fair amount of time that I didn't include in the editing, of just, fussing over the sheets, and I ended up making a couple of executive decisions in that process just to get the numbers down and usable. As far as play itself was concerned, I was extremely pleased by many aspects of it. I kept mentioning the possibility of takeover, the taking over the body, but nobody went for it, and I don't really want to treat that as GM says somebody take over the body now. I want to treat it, more just as an awareness that they don't have to just sit there. The fact that they can talk and use their powers freely is great. We saw psychic powers just like shot off like fireworks, and what they quickly realize is that they're not very powerful because they're not. They have limited use over their psychic powers. Since they rolled for what kind of power what kind of talent they had, they did get to pick the powers, but a lot of the time the power they wanted didn't really correspond with one of their higher attributes. So some of the really cool powers they can do, but they can try it, but they're not very good at it. And so we saw a lot of unsuccessful or minimally effective powers in addition to some of the really good ones. So I really liked that. The belief, they were aware that if they pull together and if they go and do a thing, and if different characters are using different powers strategically, they're aware that they could be very, very effective. But caught in the struggles of the moment was less easy for them. And as you can see, some of the outcome was actually, really, Ibu Da and Keech, I was like ready to roll that round for them to be shooting at each other. One of the actions that was done just gave the game away completely. And Keech, who had been kind of, poo-pooing this notion of these possession ghosts, it was undeniable. And they both start firing at our guy. That was quite a turn of events, actually. So they went back real quick. They were there only a few minutes and they jumped back fast. I'm not sure the IC's management is going to really appreciate, the brevity of the mission, even though I think there is a lot of data to get from it. The emotions ran hot, and we have one character who is emerging from the sleep pod, rolling up her sleeves and ready to go and beat up, one of her teammates who she thinks mismanaged the mission. So I think we will definitely jump right in on that one next time. Very different experience of play. The game is performing as advertised. Last point, I am sad that the sequencing of combat is not the same as in Legendary Lives and relies on a much more traditional by the numbers initiative roll, and a much more standard treatment of rolling to hit. The hit location rules seem to be borked. You technically only roll hit location if something is maimed, which is interesting. Until then, all damage seems to be abstract, and applied kind of, off your points or, off your wounds track. And that's it. So that's a little bit of a question. And I miss the choreography that's created in Legendary Lives by rolling for hit location first. And so the motions of everybody are just so beautifully choreographed from rounds to round. And so I kind of missed that. There's some other things that are also, I think if I'm going to speculate, that the authors had gone too odd with Legendary Lives and were kicking it back into the zone of the early 90s comfort, what is a role-playing game way to think, specifically by moving the ratings for the attributes into numerical form, their numerical equivalents, instead of using the adjectives. So the adjectives now are only used for die results, and you do the math to arrive at them rather than tracking roll your awesome strength toward, and see if you get an awesome result or whatever result. And so you've taken all the adjectives only into the effects table, and everything else is all numbers. And so that's like the comfort zone, right? It's not weird. Remember back in 1994, Marvel Superheroes, the sort of parent system of all the Legendary Lives, or so the company's stuff, Marvel Superheroes was considered to be a childish, silly system. It's weird because the game also is very explicit that talking about numbers is anti-immersive. Atmosphere, they use the word, it ruins the atmosphere. And so to have the system kick more toward explicit use of numbers and then say, don't ever say the numbers, you're getting a real mixed message there. So it's definitely, you can see the text struggling with itself in several different places in details of that kind. So far so good though. The dice rolls are now these pools of 66 pools of 6-sided dice, and you ignore the 4s, 5s, and 6s and sum up everything else. And the result, therefore, is for each increment of how many dice, once you get past 2 or 3 dice, which are kind of crap, once you get above that, then you start seeing big differences. The graphing of the bells, the heights of the bells really changes with each additional die. So it's a very nicely graded, system for the kind of resolution that it's after, and has less of a tendency for that weird swinginess that we've talked about in Legendary Lives. In fact, very little of it, I think. So there you go. Onward with some very vivid characters, actually, so far. And I'm hoping for a lot of interaction, development, and relationships among them. And, of course, the player acceptance that, you're going back in. That's how it is. Not every session begins with a jump. Playing on Earth is actually supposed to be pretty important, but I'd like to focus on the missions for a little bit first. All right, there we go. Session 1. And looking forward to more.